South Africa has had 117 known serial killers throughout its history, ranking third on the list of countries said to be having the most serial killers. From Moses Tole to the station strangler, and recently Sfiso Mkhwanazi, a 20-year-old, was arrested after the gruesome discovery of 6 bodies of women uncovered at his father's panel beating factory in the Joburg CBD. Well, let's discuss serial killing as a crime in this country and how serious it is, how widespread is it, with Professor Gerard Labuschagne, Investigative Forensic Psychologist. Prof, good afternoon. Welcome to today here on eNCA. Thank you for coming through to the studio. We began this week, of course, by covering the story of the discovery of the 6 women bodies in the Joburg CBD, pretty much in the same building. And a 20-year-old young man has been arrested, allegedly connected to one of them. So the police are still investigating. And we thought, wow, could this be serial killing? And we're speculating and stuff. Then we realized that South Africa is not known for good things in terms of when it comes to that. We are like top 3 in the world when it comes to serial killing. Is that still the case?
I pretty much say yes. You know, on the one hand, we have some very good systems set up in place to identify when we have these cases, which other countries don't have. So in a way, it's like when South Africa identified COVID variants, we were almost criticized for it. In the same way here, we have good systems to pick up the possibilities of serials being active, which also means we have perhaps more accurate stats than other countries. But in general, it is regarded that we definitely have a high number compared to, if you look at many other countries that also have relatively good mechanisms in place. And I think it's about 160 actually, not just the 117 referred to earlier, in the history of South Africa that of serials.
We're now sitting at 160.
Yeah. But we also have very good success rate at solving these cases and prosecuting them. So that experience has turned out into effective investigation and prosecution of these cases.
Yeah. Now, from a forensic perspective, I need to ask you this. I mean, what is a serial killer?
So, look, over the years there's been many definitions, but in a nutshell, in 2005, the FBI held a symposium. I was very fortunate enough to be invited to that. And the consensus that came out of that symposium, where they had people from throughout the world, was that as soon as you have 2 separate murders committed by the same individual, it's a murder series. Now, the motive might be this...
Just 2?
Yeah, two separate cases linked to the same offender. The motive might be sexually motivated. It might be like we saw with Rosemary and Ndlovu last year, who was killing people for the financial benefits, organizing the death of people for financial benefits. So there can be various different types of motives. The most common is the Moses Tole station strangler type, which is that sort of sexually power-motivated type of murder series. But essentially 2 separate incidences.
So just 2 will make one considered to be considered...
And we've testified in court. The High Court has accepted that number as being 2 in quite a few of the cases where, for example, I testified in.
Now, the number of murders we have in the country, and you are saying only 160 serial killing cases are known in South Africa so far, 160. With the type of murder rate we're having in the country, one would have thought it could be worse than that.
Well, look, I mean, that's 160 series. I mean, each series could have anything from 2 to
160
50.
series?
Yes.
Not cases, sorry,
not
I misunderstood
murders,
you.
correct, yeah.
Yeah. But that's quite a bit. That's quite a lot. So there are different motivations for serial killers, but from what I've heard in many other cases, serial killing has got something to do with a power thing, but sometimes it's a mental thing. But sometimes serial killers want to be caught.
Well, there's often the belief that they do. That's one of the things that same symposium I referred to a moment ago spoke about, these sort of myths. Do they do this? Do they want to be caught, etc.? And most of the consensus was there's not this avid intention of leaving clues behind, so hopefully the police can catch them. We've had a few cases where that has sort of been, please catch me before I kill again type of scenario, and a bit of cat and mouse where they leave messages for the police. But I think in general they get sloppy. And if they believe that after the 5th one they haven't been caught, clearly they're not going to get caught. So they don't necessarily take the forensic precautions.
So they get caught by making mistakes. Because they think, I've done it, I've killed so many people, nobody's going to catch me anyway.
And because they're typically targeting strangers, leaving them out in the bushes and the fields, you know, how they kind of have the attitude of how are the police ever going to link me? So if we look at the average serial murder in South Africa, they're coming from your low socioeconomic groups. The type of people who are doing odd jobs, piece jobs here and there. They're not necessarily watching Netflix programs on crime and investigation and picking up the tips that perhaps the rest of us might have through common sense of watching these programs. So I don't think they're often aware of the techniques that the police have to trace them, which is then ultimately often how we do end up tracing.
In South African cases in which maybe you might have been involved, what would have been the biggest motivation I mean, we're talking about this latest case. We don't know if it's a serial killing, whether this young man in Johannesburg will be linked to every single of those 6 bodies. But you could think sex could have been a sexual thing, because we are told they were sex workers. That's what came out. But what would be the main motivation here?
So the research we did, so in my time in the police, I worked on over 110 of those series. We then did large-scale research on our convicted cases, so we have some pretty good research here. And the most typical theme we get is that sexual element. There's rape involved, or some other sexual engagement with the victims, and very much about power and control, the control over the life or death of another individual. But sex is also a method of power and control over another human being. And very often, the types of things that they themselves verbalize, the offenders, is, women have treated me badly, women have given me AIDS, and now I'm getting my revenge. But the reality is many people have gone through those things but don't end up killing women. In fact, many more people have gone through those things and don't harm any woman. So that is often what we say the surface motive, that perhaps the offender does believe is their real reason. But the underlying reason about why does person X become one, I don't think we really understand.
Could it be linked to mental health?
Well, we know that very few of our serial murderers, most of them do get sent off for mental observation at a place like Sterkfontein, Valkenburg, Westkoppies, etc. And they're found fit to stand trial and having criminal capacity. Very rarely have any of them had any diagnosable mental illness. And even in some of those cases, the mental illness was not the reason, like Pindile Nchongwana in Durban, the axe killer. He had a documented history before he even started killing of mental health treatment, admissions to hospitals. But the court found that had nothing to do with him going out and attacking various people with an axe and literally decapitating some of them. It was a huge fight in court, of course, with his lawyers saying this is the reason, etc. But ultimately, that wasn't even found to be linked to the actual crimes themselves. So mental health doesn't give us the explanation for why people are actually doing this.
Yeah, just thinking, if you look at some of the cases, you were involved in 110 of those series while you were in the police and investigating them. When you look back, and now we're sitting at 160 series in South Africa instead of 117 that I referred to in my introduction. You said it's low income in the low income segments of our population where you find the proliferation of serial killing. Which has been the worst?
Sure, I mean, it depends.
I know every death is
yes,
bad, I understand. But in terms of numbers, maybe, or somebody who got away with it for too long, I don't know.
It's difficult to say. Like you say, is it numbers, or is it the person who targets child victims, or is it the person who does the most bizarre things? It's difficult to say what is worse. But definitely Moses Atoli, I think he was convicted on, I think it was 30-something of the murders, although he was believed to have actually been responsible for about 70. We've had the Quarry serial murder who had 16 murders over a period of a couple of years. But then we've had people who have, raped and strangled and murdered little children as part of their series, which of course is also horrific. So how does one really judge which is worse is very difficult to really say.
Yeah. Now, in South Africa, in terms of income groups, are they only in the low income, all these series that you're talking about, or have we found some in other segments of our population where there's been serial killing other than in the poor?
In terms of the offenders, I would say the overwhelming majority are sort of the low-income group.
The offenders.
Yeah. Of course, we've had Rosemary Mdlovu, who was a serving member of the South African Police. Kobus Kaldenes, back in the late 80s, early 90s, was a serving member of the South African Police Service. So, middle income for sure. We've never, perhaps, should I rather say, we've never caught someone who is perhaps in the sort of upper income bracket. But the general one is going to be your sort of, as I said, people who are doing odd jobs, piece jobs, lower. So, and of course, the victims they target very often come from those groups because they're targeting them with the offer of employment. And because of the high unemployment rate in South Africa, they literally can stand on a street corner in downtown Johannesburg within 10 women of asking them, do you want a job? I've got a job for you. They'll probably get someone to actually go with them.
So they are using a need that's in society to lure their victims and get hold of them. Is it easy to catch a serial killer?
It is. Definitely, you have a good chance of solving your case if you follow the principles that the police have developed over many years and all that experience that was gained. We're the only law enforcement agency that's developed an actual policy guideline for dealing with serials. I don't know how often it's adhered to. It was officially signed, I think, by the Minister or Deputy Minister of Police about 4 years ago. I don't know if they're doing that. We're the only law enforcement agency that has regular training for detectives on solving serial. And of course, my old unit, the Investigative Psychology section, whose job it is there to profile and help detectives. If you implement all of those things, there's no reason why you wouldn't solve this case. It's when people don't follow those rules that we have problems.
I know you're no longer in the police service, but how well trained is that particular unit you're referring to from what you know during your time and what you are aware of today?
Yeah. So the people in the unit now are very experienced. I mean, we have some people who've been there since about the mid-90s. And other people's, I mean, I've been there for 14.5 years. Another member, the second longest serving, has been there since about 2004. So incredibly experienced. And of course, there have been new people joining the unit who have been groomed in that process. So I don't doubt the skills there, but the problem is if the detectives aren't following the proper principles, getting those people involved and doing what we know works for serials, we're just going to delay the catching.
And that should happen when you have like 2-3 kind of murders
Ideally.
that could be linked. Then you get red flags there, and then you should begin to act as quickly as possible. So speed is really important in that investigation.
Yeah, time. We always say in a serial murder series, time equals more dead victims. So it's not like a once-off case where you've got a bit of time to thoroughly investigate, sit back, take your time to catch that one offender. In a serial, the longer you take, he's just going to have more victims. So you really need to have these steps. That's why the policy was developed, because we would find that, this province would do it this way, this particular area would do it that way. And we said there's too much of people trying to figure out what they want to do. This policy is based on best practices of all the experience we've had with these cases in South Africa, just South African experience. And that was why that policy was implemented. But like I said, how far it's actually been applied is the second question.
Yeah, and that's very important. Implementation will be very, very key. Finally, Dr. Labuschagne, before you go, I know you write quite a lot. And I don't know how many books you've written. I don't recall now. I was told how many books you've written.
2 at least. Yeah.
Two at least. But you've got a latest book that you've written now.
The second one is the
second one. Yeah. What is it about?
So both of them are about my time in the police. Both of the books have a heavy emphasis actually on serial investigation. So it's case studies about cases that I worked on in the police. And of course about the rise of serial murder in South Africa from about the mid-1990s, obviously up until I left. So
what's the title of your second book?
So they're both called Profiler Diaries. So the first one is Profiler Diaries from the Case Files of a Police Psychologist, and the second one is Profiler Diaries 2 from Crime Scene to Courtroom. I'm
sure it's available in a good bookshop. Thank you very much for your time this Friday afternoon. That's Professor Gerard Labuschagne, and Dr. Labuschagne is an investigative forensic psychologist, as you heard. He's also an author, just sharing some of his insights about serial killing in South Africa. The numbers are shocking, 160 series, and then each of the series, of course, would have a number of people who were killed, 1 or 2, and it only takes 2 murders by the same individual to be classified, and it's acceptable now in South Africa as a serial killing. Very, very chilling stuff indeed.